of smart TV apps. So if you have any questions, please fire away. We have the major Transmedia stars here now who come from around the world who will be joining us in this panel discussion. We warmly welcome them. Could you gentlemen please come up and we will introduce you in a moment.
Ils viennent de toute l'Europe, ils viennent aussi de...
So they come from all over Europe and they also come from Paris. We're very proud of welcoming them today. Some of you might have been listening to Ginn yesterday. He's a producer and he's there together with us. Robert Pratten is founder of Transmedia, Storyteller. Boris Razon is head of a digital storytelling and transmedia unit at FTV. Simon Staffans is designer of cross and transmedia formats. Raymond Van Der Kaaij is working at Revolver Media, and the moderation is carried out by Laurent, Guerin, who is a specialist, an expert in transmedia production. And I'm very pleased to have this debate with you and looking forward to listening to the questions from the room. Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for being here. I'm very proud of having the opportunity of moderating this roundtable. We're going to have an interactive, interesting discussion. I will give you the floor very quickly. Cross-media is a rather new item, and we are talking a lot about it. We are acting a little bit on it, and I'm very pleased to have here with me today people who are major acting and players. I probably switch from French into English with this panel because only Boris is the one who's talking French here on this panel. I guess everyone will have the opportunity to introduce himself and talk about their actions and major deeds. So this morning I would like to react to this topic, the topic of this Cross-Video Days conference, and to ask one question, which is what does a cross-media project, what makes such a project successful? How to create a successful transmedia project? This is my first question to all of those panelists. Success, is that related to the audience, to the selling, to the writing? What is the key point here? So I probably give you the floor first. Boris, what do you think? What are the factors or criteria to make a project successful? This is, of course, a very complex issue because there are many factors. First, I would say that a successful cross-media project is the one that could engage a part of the audience and pull in the audience on social networks and digital networks so that the audience is really core to the program. So this relationship between the program and the audience is really has to be strong and has to generate involvement from the audience. So this is the first factor I'd like to mention. But I think there are many other factors, at least now in France and also everywhere in the world. So we see that designing a total story world that may fit in several media is a genuine performance.
To give your opinion, Jan is working right now on a big project with zombies. Earlier, I said vampires. Never take vampires for zombies when you talk to Jan. Can you give us your opinion about a successful transmedia project? And of course, I think the context is right. What is a successful transmedia project in 2012? Yeah. The microphone.
it is indeed, it's quite complex. And there are different axes. I believe that in the early days of Transmedia that we find ourselves in, a central part of any project is to explore and investigate what works in terms of the grammar and syntax of telling stories across many platforms and media. And so for me, every project that we're working in has a very large aspect of research and development, and it's to do with finding out what's working by doing and failing quickly. So yes, I'm working on the sci-fi, actually it's a zombie project, but it's a sci-fi thriller, and it is quite a large project. We ran a large-scale pilot in Amsterdam that wasn't concerned with the financial aspect. The next installment of that project in the story world does have a commercial aspect to it, and it's to do with how do you engage audiences in order to have them buy tickets and engage in a ticketed event, so that there's an online media part, there's a live element as well. So for me, still, the creative aspect is what's leading. You know, you can get involved with entertainment formats, which I think have got a very kind of relevant part to play, and I think there's transmedia formats which are clearly entertainment aspects, but for me it's very much to do with looking at how audiences engage, what happens with them and so forth. I would say that that's the core, and then of course how do you monetize it.
Simon?
Yeah, I totally agree with both speakers. I think that might be a problem on the stage, that we agree too much. We'll try to get some debate going as well. We can argue, yeah, you're good at that. No, but what I would like to say is that there are so many different types of transmedia projects that to define what success is on a broad scale is as hard as to define what transmedia is in itself. Because, I mean, you look at the blockbuster from Hollywood, the success is probably that you get a lot of people going to the cinema to watch it.
Money.
Yeah, money, yeah. Money is a good way to measure success. But I think the key issue when you start out developing a transmedia project is to be very clear, everyone who is involved, everyone sponsors and everyone, about what will be a success in this transmedia project. Will it be much more money in, or will it be audience engagement or audience loyalty? Will it be a lot of hits on YouTube, or will it basically be new knowledge if you're a research-based thing or whatever? But you have to be, everyone who's involved have to be really clear on what will we consider a success in the context of this particular project. Only then can you.
So you mean deciding what will be the success before? I mean, determining your objectives before you make the program.
Yeah, we tried it the other way around. It's not that good.
Yeah, well. The thing I was thinking. So you told about the audience meets the audience, and also having a good story world and the engagement, research and development, story. Where are we standing as far as rentability, visibility, and money is concerned on the successful projects? Any examples of successful projects?
Well, I think the lady that presented before showed some examples of where the TV show viewing audiences have increased because of engagement away from the TV on social media and stuff like this. So I think there are examples of successfully employing the right sort of techniques outside of what might be kind of the primary vehicle that's generating the revenue. And then if you're talking specifically about new forms of entertainment that people haven't seen before and saying, right, well, that's transmedia because it's not a TV show, so we might measure that as a TV show and say it's successful, then I think there are fewer examples that you can say were an out-and-out success, because no one knows what the measure was, like what the objective was of the creators, really. So I agree with Simon completely that you need to define the goal. So, for example, we see in some like branded content where the goal might be to shift preference. So you've got a consumer that's not even, there's a product that needs to be repositioned. And so using transmedia storytelling, you can see that now where the audience wasn't even considering a product before, now maybe they are. And that shift can occur without maybe running, without running a TV ad, because the TV ad, no one kind of believes it. It reaches lots of people. People get the awareness. They know it's out there, but maybe it doesn't shift the preference. Whereas building in this participation, this engagement, people feel this greater affinity to that story world and hence to the brand, and therefore you get the shift in preference.
J'avais envie de poser la question à Boris, du coup, avant.
So, Boris, I wanted to ask you, before moving on to the next topic, to ask you the following question. What are the successful projects at FTV this year? We mentioned Metronome earlier on during Amandine Cassie's presentation. Is it one successful project? What are the other major FTV projects of this year? I'll come back to the previous question, because if we assess our success due to our testing, be there cross-media or digital, just only digital projects, we always test the program in order to see how successful it is and how much adherence it gathers. So we try to put together all these successful elements in order to generate the right program. So Metronome was a successful program, of course. We had also Manipulation, that was a program launched in November 2011. It is a web documentary that is a soap documentary that is close to a gaming program dedicated to this clear stream affair broadcast on FTV5. We saw on this project that we had on the one hand a gaming aspect, the opportunity to visit the website and explore the program online with a distinctive strategy. We had a really boost in the audience and with very satisfactory ratings. And then we saw that the directing team was available online live in order to chat with the audience, and this was a major success, this live chatting event. So this direct relationship between the viewers of the programs, may there be viewers on TV or on the internet, and the team implicated, involved in the creation and directing of the program, is a very positive asset, and it's something we can build on. Another element, and it's the last one I'm going to quote, is Campagna Vélo to the countryside with your bicycle. So we sent 2 journalists to the countryside in France with their bicycles, and it was exclusively over Facebook, and those journalists were sending pictures and videos. So we saw first that the audience involvement was very high, so that the journalists could find accommodation at some people's places and then talk with them. They would talk about their lives. And then this highly digital experience became a 1-hour documentary movie that was broadcast right after the presidential election. So we saw that those those digital media can be used as labs.
Those examples might be very successful. I don't consider that to be transmedia storytelling, because there you've got the actual creators talking about their show with the audience, and obviously they're involved in, but there's no storytelling there. So in my world, we take fictional characters. But you said it was, didn't you say it was the filmmakers talking to the audience?
No, it was both teams.
Was it the fictional character?
Non, c'était à la fois un documentaire.
They made both things.
Okay.
It was 2 ways of telling the same story.
No, because the way that we look at transmedia storytelling is to take the fiction, if we look at a TV show, would be to take a fictional character or fictional entity from the show and give them social media accounts, email accounts, text messaging, and then allow the story to continue between the TV episodes. And that's how we would look to maintain engagement, so that you don't have to have a live person sat there all week communicating with people, although you would need some kind of community management. But there's a story outside of the show, and that maintains engagement to get people coming back every week.
Yeah, what I was what I was getting at, though, I think, is that I didn't want, maybe I should have, but I didn't want us to go into the transmedia definition because nobody really agrees and it covers a lot of things. But rather how everyone uses the transmedia and the engagement. And indeed, some of the producers use characters, fictional characters, and also there is a big way on audience engagement. And in this particular case, I think what was done with the manipulations on the audience, it was like it was almost having the creators and the community managers almost 24 hours answering questions, not only on the web documentary, on things that were seen, things that were not seen, if I'm not mistaken, precisions, and I think it was enriching altogether the content.
Yes, it was as if the story was still going on the web.
C'était
So for those of you who have not watched this program, it's still online. Is it still online? Yes. But there is no community management yet anymore. So this was a very interesting project, and I think Boris's input is of a high interest to the audience, because we see that FTV is a testing. That's what you told me at a previous interview we had, that you really test mechanisms and systems in order to then implement them through other programs. And I thought that this mechanism of getting permanently a feedback from the community managers and directors was a rather new element and really fitting in the audience. So I now give the floor to Raymond, who hasn't spoken yet. Raymond. And after this first question, which was what is a successful transmedia project, I would like to now move on to a next step, which is cast light on the production and buzzing aspects. So buzz, it's always a difficult point, a difficult item. And I'll ask Raymond, what are the challenges when you write a cross-media project? Which question do you need to ask yourselves as a producer? What are the new trade and businesses that have to be involved in this writing process, and what kind of trade and businesses have to come around the table together with the producer?
Okay. Well, I don't think there is really like a set of rules for how you produce or prepare for a transmedia project. So I can only talk based on our own experience. What we've learned from, for example, our last project is that what was very, very crucial, for example, but that's actually not different from making a feature film, I guess, as well, is to really define your audience, to really know where your audience is. But I think it's even more important here because what we've seen, and I think this is also what you see in other projects, is that you're actually building your audience while you're basically preparing or while you're already rolling out your project. So your production process is much more parallel. So where you work, for example, with feature films, which we also do, it's quite, how would you say that, phased or something, right? So you've got your writing, you have a script, you finance it, you started, like casting, pre-production, it's like step by step. But with transmedia, it really sort of is parallel. So it really goes through each other, and we were already building an audience while we are actually, still working on the story. So that is rather different, and this is something that we've learned, that therefore you really need to know where your audience is and which steps you're going to take in your process, in your whole production process, to build your audience. Because it goes from, in our case again, and I think this is what you see very often, it goes from a very specialized audience, like a smaller group, and it slowly builds up. So you're sort of creating like a, how would you say that, like a Lawine effect or something, Yeah.
Jan, when we talked over the phone and when we prepared this conference, you told me about the system you had and your company and the sandbox you were using and how you were having, if I understood correctly, writers, game designers. Can you tell us about this? How you manage to, how do you write these your projects?
I think Raymond's correct as well that one of the big differences is that the writing is going to continue while the program is being distributed, and the program or the Transmedia event is being distributed in a kind of a streamed way while it's happening, which means that production's also staggered. You're not going to go off and in a very kind of concentrated way shoot like you would a movie for 45 days and then go off and edit it and then release it. You're shooting and then you're releasing, and you're releasing it into an environment in which your audience is aware of the story and participating with you, and so you're getting feedback from them as well, which is only makes sense if you're going to do something with it, which works out that you might write the whole thing beforehand in some way, but you're going to rewrite it and in some way be affected by the way that the audience experiences and responds to your project. Okay, so I'm getting to what you're asking. So when we started to look at the major project that we did, we've run maybe 10 smaller projects, and when we started to work on this major project, I could see that we were looking at some kind of pervasive story which we were telling across several different media, and that there were a lot of game mechanics, and we were doing theatrical, pervasive live events on streets, and so we brought together two screenwriters, two writers for the web. We brought in a game designer, and the sandbox that you're referring to is the way that I've kind of organized my company. I had a production company for a long time doing film and TV, and the way that we're organized now is that our core effort is to try and develop intellectual properties that can be licensed at a certain point. So before you get there, we have this kind of sandbox, which is our media research group, which sounds very grand. We're a very small company, but we bring in a networked way those experts and those creatives that we need for a specific project, and it's explorative. You're trying to find out what the core elements of the story, and for me what I got to is that there's still a kind of an act structure, so that you can, when you go live with a project and you create what's called a rabbit hole, which is like one big signal. Ours, we had zombies in a major music festival, and we had and that was on screen, that was being reported on television. When kids saw that there were zombies at the festival, they Googled zombies at Lowlands and found that we'd set up a whole prologue. So getting briefly, we had a prologue and we had the rabbit hole, and then we had, through the 5-6 weeks we were running live, 3 main acts. And we structured that in terms of writing with 3 narratives, so that you had 3 forces within our story that you might well have in a normal linear film, and we brought those 3 forces together across different media, meeting in live events. And now that was a kind of a playful massaging of a lot of different story elements, until we still had protagonists and antagonists, and we still had the main plot lines, and we had some subplot lines, but we kind of broke them out and pushed them across different platforms. I hope that gets some close to where you wanted to go.
Simon, do you want to have a reaction?
Yeah, I just picking up on something that Raymond said about audience and getting the audience. That's what we found as well. The Levine effect, that you have to start building somewhere and getting somewhere and going out and finding more people and have them basically propagation planning, or whatever you want to call it. But what we found is that if you can dip into some sort of trend, if you can find a community, if you can fish where the fish are, as people like to say, you get sort of an initial boost that is much better. But then again, you have to be very careful when dipping into those sort of communities, so that you don't barge in and say, hey, this is my project, come and like me on Facebook. You have to actually plan for that as well in advance, that you are a natural part of that community before you start to launch something in that community. And then to pick up on something...
Can I, before you do, I just want to respond to that very briefly.
Yes,
see, I think big numbers are great, but I think smaller numbers are much more valuable. It's much better to have a highly engaged audience that you have found that really likes your story, that stays with you, and that will engage with you and work with you. And at a certain point, you're going to go wider. But the main thing is to grow, I think, to grow a real loyal and engaged audience that really understands your project. And I'd much rather have a smaller number. It's this kind of pyramid, right? You've got 5% of the top, 20% that's going to share, and 80% that are kind of general consumers. And that 5 and 20%, they're the ones that I want to reach to begin with.
No, I totally agree. It just depends on the context of whatever you're doing. But the projects I've lately been working on, I find that if I reach 100,000 people, chances are 5,000 will engage fully. If I reach only 10,000, chances are not half of them will engage. So I'll go for larger numbers, but then I do television a little. To respond to one thing that you said about you getting in all the game people, programming people and web writers, etc., the importance of getting a good team together. As a transmedia producer, you would need to be sort of a jack of all trades and know a little bit about everything, about the tech, about the story, about the marketing, about everything that makes up a transmedia project. But then you need to get in people who are better than you to do all these other stuff. And that's sort of like the key thing, to get in people that can understand each other and that you perhaps can act as a translator and so forth.
I wanted to ask you this question because you have a lot of producers in the audience. Is it easy to have one writer who's used to write TV work with a game designer today? I mean, they haven't been working together for a long time.
Yes, they have. I mean, this started way back in the early 90s, right? When CD-ROM started, which was where I started in digital media. At that point, we had the first generation of digital artists working on still at Amigas at that point, and Photoshop 1.0 and everything. And we had programmers that wanted to have something different from the scene that the artists were on. One wanted a very, like thousands of colors in the animation. The other wanted whatever it was, number of frames per second. And even at that point, you had to find a way to take the best of everyone that was working on that project, have them collaborate, and sacrifice a few % of what they each wanted in order to create something that was fantastic. And that interactive thinking, non-linear storytelling, and different skill sets is what we've always been, working on. It's slightly more accentuated than in a TV situation where you've got front of camera talent and tech talent, and they know in a kind of what their relationships are. And with interactive media, we've worked it out, and now with transmedia, we're kind of getting into something that's more complex, and there are more difficulties in it. But collaboration is the key, right?
But you're sort of training up your writers, though, because I think that the writers have to be good in the medium that they're writing for, because you can see it where you take a well-known author and you get them to write a screenplay, and it's dreadful because they don't know how to write a screenplay, don't know how to write for the screen. And it'll be similar with these transmedia experiences. So on a project we're working on now, it's a feature film, so that's where the money's coming from. And just pick up Raymond's point, we're developing the transmedia story segment to help build the audience for the feature film before the feature film's even shot. So we have like a fake website, and so just before I go into that, so we're a technology company and we want people to use our technology. So it's not enough for us just to say, oh, invent your writing style as you go along. So we've developed very formal methodologies for how people should approach transmedia storytelling if they've got some existing linear content. So if they've got like a book or a TV show or whatever, then we have a certain approach to that, and we identify different areas or different ways for the audience to participate. So in this particular feature film, one of the objects we have is just a world-building tool. It's like a pack of tarot cards that are shown in the film. And we had someone come in to actually design the cards, like the game mechanics for the cards, without actually revealing what the rules are, because we want the audience to invent their own rules, and they'll be able to download these cards from the website and so on. And then on the other hand, we had a writer do this participative writing where there's a fake website where you sign up for a clinical trial of a drug that doesn't exist, and then the story unfolds over email and social media for each. And so we've got I think there's about 3 writers that we've brought in, each to work on their specific little bit where we know that they have some knowledge of writing for that medium, or if they don't, then they sit down with us and we kind of train them up a little bit, like I guess Ian's doing. There's one, just while I got the mic, one final thing about this, about these hardcore audiences and big numbers, because what we've seen on our project Lowlifes is it's so you've got all these people that are not out there looking for new entertainment, or like all they do is they buy from top 10 lists. So if it gets mentioned in the paper, then it gets on their radar and they might buy it. To get into that top 10, that's when you need the hardcore. So it comes back to, again, like find the audience, really know that audience, and then leverage them. And we've actually got figures now from a project we did called Lowlifes, where we can see, so we gave everything away for free, but we also made the book available to purchase, like on Kindle, on Amazon. And we can see the social media activity, and then we see the tipping point where the number of sort of like advocates, if you want, pushed it up from being unknown into a top list, and then you can see the figures sort of break out. And I think you can see that all the time. If you put a slide, like a presentation on SlideShare, then what I'll see is people, like just people that follow me on SlideShare or on Twitter, start to watch it, and then you'll get an email from SlideShare saying, you're hot on Facebook, and we've put it on the front page, and now the figures go up through the roof. And so, again, it's like leveraging that hardcore that you really understand and getting them to reach bigger audiences.
Raymond?
Yeah, I just would like to add something to the, you know, like to the writing and the development process, what we just mentioned, because it's obviously very important for us as producers. Is that I found, until now at least, I've experienced that writers that we know, that we work with, coming from, you know, feature film or like television background, also writers that, you know, in Holland at least, that you know, are coming from Film Academy or, you know, those kind of, you know, educations, they find it very hard to think in a transmedia way, and actually sometimes even were sort of counterproductive. The moment that they, you know, in an earlier stage have to think in a more fragmented way, they sort of, you know, that you're sort of shut down in a way. So, you know, I've experienced that the ones that, you know, we work a lot with people coming from advertising. Actually, we work a lot with writers that have more like an, you know, background in art academy, that have more, you know, sort of an openness to sort of experiment with different ways of, you know, like putting, you know, down the story. And where we work with writers that have, let's say, a more traditional background, we usually start with saying, don't worry about the rest, just write a good story. And then we'll chop it, you know, we'll sort of chop it down into, like, you know, like more like a transmedia context. But for us, we notice that it's quite difficult. The first start, the writing process, is very difficult to get through that. You know, and therefore, actually, what you said also, Ian, it's very important. I think it was you who said that, to really have, you know, like a really good team. And for the last 2 projects, we actually got, indeed, we had like a transmedia producer on board, and we had, let's say, I don't know, there's different names for that, but let's say like a community manager or someone that was really focusing on, okay, how do we create a dialogue? How does it work with the engagement and the interaction? And she was really sort of guiding the writer through that process step by step, and that really helped as well.
Je voudrais juste ajouter une chose, c'est que forcément.
I'd like to add one point to this. I think that the role of the producer is the one of a person who's in a position of putting together all those various skills and competences in order to get the most out of each person.
And before we move on to the production process, I wanted Robert to tell us quickly about Conductor, because Robert has been talking about transmedia and producing for quite a number of years, and when he figured out that it was so complex and that elements were everywhere, Facebook profiles, emails, fictional character, and etc., his company developed a software aimed at producers, broadcasters, and also
Anyway, any content creator.
any content manager to manage and publish and organize these transmedia content. And maybe you can tell us a word about this briefly.
Sure. So one way to think of Conductor is a network intelligence. So it's not a content management system, because your content will be on like a proprietary system, or it might be on social media, like on Flickr, on YouTube. And what Conductor attempts to do is create connected, personalised experiences between the audience. So in some of the examples that we saw before in the data presentation, there's a Facebook game, there's a mobile app, there's the web series, there's a social game, whatever. But they're kind of islands of entertainment. And what Conductor looks to do is to stitch those all together. And we can even go right down to the purchasing part. So we're working with a company in Sweden where there's a product registration code in the box. And if someone tweets the product registration code, it unlocks new story, but we now know that they bought the product. And so we can look at the lifetime value of an audience member. And we can see, like, was somebody a big advocate here? Was they really active on social media and talking about the program? And did they actually buy it in the end? Because there's been some studies about, you know, who's the most value. Obviously, you need sales, but maybe people that buy are not the same people that are advocating. And so I think with our platform, we say it's about audience engagement, and that's the key to it, writing stories on social media. It's, you know, it can be used in a variety of ways. Like the metrics that come out of this storytelling approach can be really valuable in their own right.
And another question for Simon, because when I interviewed Simon, I learned that he has been in the format developing industry for many years, and we're still talking about how to write for a transmedia project. Altogether, is it harder to write with a transmedia component, or is it as hard as writing for television? What's your experience in that? What do you find today?
Well, first off, I should start by saying I'm sort of like a transmedia purist, so I'd be hard pressed to define most of the formats we do as actual transmedia formats. Developed with the help of transmedia storytelling methods and principles. Along those principles, yes, but then it's you know, cross-media, multi-platform. Well, those go into each other. Let's not go into that discussion. But yeah, it's harder, of course, yes. If you do a regular quiz show, and I'm not saying it's easy to do a good quiz show. It's really hard, and you have a lot of competition out there. Trust me. But it's if you try to make transmedia and mesh that with a format, you need that story somewhere in the background. And if you're going to do it in a quiz or a game show setting, you would need to develop a quiz or a game show with some form of background story. And it's neat. I mean, it could be very nice, but it's a hard sell. It's a much harder sell than a regular quiz show. So yeah, it makes it more difficult. But on the other hand, on projects we have been working on, we've found that it has helped us with the initial funding, because when you develop more stuff, you get more possibilities to get in sponsors, and you.
Because il est vrai que
the project, and you can also, since you create so much more material, you can spread it out over different broadcasters. For instance, we did a music thing last year, music show called The Mill Sessions, where we had short story. There's an old mill on the west, steam mill, 160-year-old steam mill, where we have a television studio on the west coast of Finland, where I'm situated. And top artists from Finland come there for one day to be a part of the Mill Sessions collective, where they forget about everything else and just concentrate on music. It's a beautiful show. Go and watch it online. And there we got, you know, the record companies paid, the big ones, Warner, EMI, etc. Then we had the IPTV, telco broadcaster, paying for the HD version, which was longer and different from the standard definition version that the television station bought. And then we had sponsors in, etc., etc. So you could just mesh out different parts of the show, of the project, to different buyers, basically. So yeah, it's harder, but it gives you more possibilities as well.
Okay. You anticipate the producing I wanted to talk about. Thank you. Justement, pour
Basically, okay, Can you hear the translation? Just to continue on this production theme, I'd like to pick up a point, Boris, you mentioned earlier about, we're going to continue this discussion. How do you produce, optimize through Transmedia, the importance here of a producer, the role of a producer who can work with all these different businesses together? What are the main problems, difficulties in this type of production today? What are the new businesses that you need at France Television, production or in community management and so on, or in other business lines? How would you manage that type of production project specifically? Well, not in production maybe directly, but there are other businesses involved here. Quite clearly, in digital media, obviously you need to be in contact with the audiences, what we call community management. Then that's an example and a case in point. I don't like the term especially because we tend to separate the project out a little too much. But often in these projects, and certainly in what we'd like to develop, the relationship with the audience is central in an editorial sense. We will involve a lot of game designers here because they are intrinsic to certain web then born media, and the links between the media can be games and should be conceived as games actually. So today each project then has its own or requires its own fields of expertise that will vary then depending on the screenplay, writer, then graphic artist, designer, and so on. So what's important ultimately is to identify the types of skills or skill sets required then to be successful in these projects. But there is a wide array of different then transmedia projects around today, to the extent that these are businesses which, where there are different businesses involved. I mean, necessarily, such as we have a 10-person team who could be then Alex Mayer, or could be digital marketers and so on, who are now increasingly involved. Do they get on? I mean, they do. Yes, they do. They have a good relationship, and that's what it's all about. Making people gel. I'd like to return, if I may. Anna, Rebecca, and Raymond talked about the importance of creating an audience as you produce during the production. So I wondered whether this is an aim for independent producers as well. Then, in your own practice, do you create an audience during production? Partly, not at all, yes. That's a separate case. For example, if we take Comano, that's just an example. That's a project. That's a project in real time that then aggregated or built up its audience as it went along. So one of the parameters here is real time. It's this relationship, immediate real-time relationship with your audience, where you're getting feedback, collecting views, opinions, and comments, so that you can that we can then work on. So necessarily, then, it's important that we know who our target audience is and what it expects and what we expect of it as well. So it's about investing, reinvesting constantly in this type of project. There are two sides to this. We've got, first of all, producing the production, then phase as you build up your audience through feedbacks, then a feedback system or process, but there's also the budgetary aspects. Ian mentioned earlier that in some of these projects you may have 3 budget lines. That's true for many producers. There are 3 budget lines, low, medium, and high budget lines, but also several areas of the production process, zombies, as it were. Maybe you can say a bit about that.
Before I do, I'd like to just make a couple of comments about the whole idea of transmedia and producing in general. And even before that, this idea of audience, right? Even with television, it was never the case, as far as I've understood it, or with the film, it's never the case that you make a program and there's an audience sitting there waiting for your program, especially if it's a new series, right? So there's always the case that you have to build an audience. I mean, it would be great if we knew that we were making a program or publishing a book and there's just an audience sitting there waiting for that, but that's not the way that the world works. So somehow you have to attract it. And that was always the challenge for television to, and that's what ratings are all about, right? That's those magic numbers. What's our number? Did we make it? And so forth. In terms of an audience for television, it used to be, at least in the UK, that on a Friday or a Saturday night, there were letters to the editor, and there was one guy on a television screen that was reading out a couple of lines. Do you remember those programs?
No, too young.
Letters to the editor, it was called, right? Yeah, you remember it. And so you'd get, you'd get 20 minutes, and you'd have 5 million viewers, and every now and then you'd get like one. Well, that's gone, right? So if that situation's gone, and it used to also be true that broadcasters didn't actually want to know what the audience thought. It would be the worst thing in the world that if you were going to have a kind of a direct contact with your viewers. A lot of people 5 years ago in television thought that was awful. Okay, well, so that situation's gone, right? I think the most interesting thing in terms of being an independent producer and relationship with commissioning editors is to find those broadcasters that have managed to do two things. One is understand the challenges of creating 360 content. How are we going to do it, and how are we going to spread it, and what does it mean? And the second thing they've managed to do is navigate the crazy politicians that we've got around these days that don't see the value of public broadcast and don't see the, where we all like commercial broadcasters, but the value of a public broadcast system, which has always been there, means that you've now got the value of a public media system, right? And that we should be creating valuable content in a 360 environment. And so you have to have a situation where you're allowed to actually make it. In Holland at the moment, we've got this right-wing government that's restricting public broadcasters who had a great strategy, and as an independent producer, it's very difficult to work with producers because they're limited in what they're allowed to do in a crazy world. So where the audience wants 360, where the kids are growing up, and public broadcasters are losing their audience because no kid watches television, where they can offer something, the politicians are stopping them doing it because they think it doesn't belong in public broadcast. That's just like one little shout out for some sort of upside down world that we're living in, right? In terms of producing, I believe that Transmedia is a producer's medium, right? Because I think even with a film, you used to try and find a product, whether it was a book or original story, massage it, find writers to work on it, finance it, package it, get the talent on board, and then do the whole deal and then get it made and get it out there. And what we're trying to do here is bring in, like we've been saying, bring in the talent that you need for where you're at. So I would never bring a video director or a film director on board in my core creative team because I might want their vision at a certain point to translate part of the script into really good film, television, web. But they've got not a lot to say to me about the game, I think. So that's why I think in core that this Transmedia is a producer's medium, right? That's my way of working. Did I answer your question, or did I go in a totally different direction? What was the question again? And I'll be very quick.
I was asking you about the different versions of your budget, low, medium, and how flexible you need to be in your budget, in your installments, and how you must produce while looking for the money.
Okay, so what I find is indeed when we create the core document which we pitch to get finance from an experimental media stream, there's a very small team that puts that together, and I'm the lead of that team as a creative producer. And then when I bring talent on board to write it with me, once you've got funding and you're going to do detailed design, some of the things I really wanted to do on all of my projects don't get done because of that sacrifice moment. Afterwards, I think I was right anyway. But for the energy of the moment, you have to go with what your creative team's really going and see what are the core things. So it's a balance between what the creative direction of the detailed design's taking you and indeed what budget you've managed to corral. And so you say, okay, we wanted to create a rabbit hole which was a graphic novel, which would have cost quite a lot to produce it, draw it, have it designed, produced, printed and distributed around all the universities of Holland. That's what we thought we were going to do. And what we actually did was, for example, have a guerrilla moment where we had our zombies and the protagonists in this story invade a TV presenter at a music festival talking about the day's events. So that impact was that we reached 800,000 people on television. It had the same kind of moment of attention, and it was a lot more inexpensive to produce. And I think that that's the kind of thing that, so in a way, I believe a lot in guerrilla movement. If you're not part of a broadcast, you need to find a way to break into more mainstream media.
What I was going to add is about the workflow, because you're right, there was never like an audience out there waiting for your content when it came out, but it was always someone else's problem. Like, because you would like make the film and give it over to the distributor, and they were going to find the audience. Whereas now, I think the marketing has to be baked in right from the beginning. You have to start thinking about the audience, where they're going to discover it, and so on. Start thinking about social media strategy right from the right end. And just because you mentioned about graphic design, so just a case in point. So we're working on this feature film project. We've got the script; it's almost finished, and we sit down with the branding agency that's going to do like everything. So they're going to do the graphics that are in the film, so the in-character stuff, and then the out-of-character stuff. And we're saying, like, right, we need this iconic graphic, like that people can graffiti stencil everywhere. And of course, you can't just come up with a symbol. It needs to have a story significance, because it's going to be in the film, and it's also going to be part of the marketing. And then we came up with a symbol, and then we like modified the story so that we could like involve it. And it was only a small little tweak, but it's significant, and it's just an example of where we're thinking about how we're going to sell the film right from the outset.
And actually, just to add something to that, I think, you know, for a producer, and especially when you're basically coming from, let's say, a TV or a feature film background, moving into transmedia, one very key element to remember is that audience participation is actually key to success of a transmedia project, at least with most transmedia projects. So that means that there is a certain level of unpredictability in your project that starts from the very first beginning and will last until the end. That means that when you work on a budget and when you do your financing, even more than with, let's say, traditional media productions, you need to be prepared for that. Now that means, of course, you can keep some space for that in your budget. But in our case, we work, for example, with funds, subsidies, broadcasters. And I try to explain that to them. Well, there is a chunk of money here that we don't know what we're going to do with that, but we might need it. You know, so that's. We also notice that I personally took a lot of time to explain basically to all the financiers that it's a different way of budgeting, it's a different way of producing, that I don't know everything yet. While when you work on a feature film, you have your breakdown, your planning, everything is more or less locked, and maybe you have some stuff happening during the shoot, but if everything goes well, everything works as you have prepared it. With transmedia, it's not like that at all. And you need to be ready for that as a producer as well, and to basically improvise, to basically adapt your whole, maybe even your whole production strategy or your whole production path. So you need to basically be ready to sort of work your way around that.
But don't you think that's an advantage? I think that's an advantage, because you're putting content out there early before you've bet the whole sort of bank on it. And you're finding what works and what doesn't work, and you can modify the project so that you make a big success at the end before you've spent all the money. Otherwise, you create this monolithic kind of mono media, and then no one wants it.
I think it's no, absolutely. I'm sorry. It is. I mean, absolutely, it is an advantage. But just answering the question about the budget and how do you deal with that, I think this is something that you really need to remember, especially when you start doing transmedia projects as a producer, and you're used to sort of work with more or less locked budget. That's not going to work.
Just to add to that, now we've been talking about television and film, etc. But if you work with brands, for instance, in a television production, that it's quite a challenge for brands to accept that the outcome or the development and the production process is not set in stone, and there are certain parts that will not be, that you won't be able to control if you want audience participation, which you want. So that's a bit of a challenge for brands to overcome, so to speak.
Raymond was talking about a project, transmedia project, being unpredictable. I think brands don't like the unpredictable. Alors, on va
Basically, we're going to end. We've got another 10 minutes left, gentlemen. We're going to talk about buzzing and promotion. And then before we move on, do we have 10 minutes? We have more than 10 minutes. Time is on our side, gentlemen. Time is on our side. Okay, we have to end up at 11 for a Q&A. We maybe have some questions from the room. Maybe I'll ask the first question, possibly a little impolitely. Gentlemen.
What is your vision of the future of Transmedia? What do you think it will become? Still be a kind of laboratory experience, as Boris was saying before? Or will it come some mass market question? What do you think about that?
I'll take it briefly. I think that we're at the very early days in the same way 100 years ago we were the early days of cinema. And in the first 25 years of cinema, a lot of experiments created the basic grammar of syntax that we're still using today. Difference is we're working across a lot of different media, and no one can tell me in 3 years anything to do with what the digital media landscape is going to look like, even if Facebook's around, right? What I do know at the moment is that 1 in every 6 minutes on the web is a Facebook minute, and people really trust those things, right? The other big driver, so we've got 3 drivers: networks and channels which are now stable enough to deliver really good content, tools which are really mature enough to create this kind of cross stuff, a new generation of makers that get it natively because they've grown up with it, and an audience that's also grown up with it, and they want different types of content. So one thing's definite: it's not going away. It's the idea of getting more sophisticated, matrixed, tightly woven experiences of play and story, which to me are the flip side of the same coin. We're finding out how to do it. And what we're actually trying to do is create a kind of a symphony of media and storytelling where different instruments play together to create one overall experience. And I don't think that anyone's kind of got there yet. I do a lot of teaching and mentoring, and I'd love one of these projects to kind of break out and become that thing that becomes really wide. I don't think it's going to come from Hollywood. Although I'd love a lot of, like Tim Kring's trying to push the envelope, but I don't think it's going to come from Hollywood because I think that the system there is too complex and already kind of pre-structured. So something's going to break out from the ground up and become something big, I think. I'd love it to be a game project, but I think that the big game consoles are also too complex in a way that they create finance restrictions where CEOs have to report quarterly on what they're doing, and that kind of predicates against a lot of kind of breakout type of content. So but I think it'll be more, not less, that's going to happen.
I mean, our vision is of like persistent story worlds that are pervasive. So this story world exists in real life as well as it does on a screen or on a tablet somewhere, and the story is always evolving. So you might interact with it at one point, and then you come back to it again and you find that it's moved on because of other community involvement in the story or because it's been scripted. And I also think, to Ian's point, if you think about the world before Photoshop, so people that wanted to do digital graphics would have to actually code it themselves or find a coder to help them do these kind of arty things with computer graphics. Now with Photoshop, creative people have the tools right in their hands to be able to express themselves, and that's what we're trying to create, a transmedia version of Photoshop where people just come in and create these projects. That's what we want to be. And
just to add a little bit to that, transmedia is one hell of a buzzword right now. I met so many people at MIP TV, etc., who all of a sudden are transmedia producers, which is quite interesting. But I think that the transmedia practices and principles and methods will just become a natural part of how to create media or brand engagement or whatever. It's gonna be not saying, oh, you have characters on Facebook, or you do a graphic novel, or you do whatever. It's like, why don't you do it? It's gonna be in 5 years. It's gonna be a natural part of. It's not gonna be just a little part of the marketing budget for a big movie. It's going to be a natural part of the whole budget, I think.
On a beaucoup parlé.
We talked a lot about preparing.
Of the media, there is only one big media on the table, so I think it's interesting to have his point of view.
I have nothing to add on that, actually. I fully share the views expressed here. Actually, what we're talking about here is a world the digital world, which is changing people's practices in a pretty major way. It's done so in the way they obtain information, then the way they conceive music, then produce music on different TV channels, then and in video production projects. So ultimately, and fundamentally, when we put this into context, what we're trying to do here is to tell a story in a code that people use every day. Day in, day out. So today we talk about transmedia projects, the architecture, the configuration, but ultimately this is looking for grammar, a language, a syntax, as one of our panelists mentioned. This shouldn't be that complicated, actually. My final question before I hand over to the floor, the buzzword here, and Robert mentioned this term, producers produce, design, conceive, and then the next phase begins. We've talked about looking for audiences, then creating the buzz, then developing the buzz, spreading the buzz. I'd like your view on this, gentlemen. Today, authors, producers must surely contribute to building audiences. When Boris Razon was working with David Dufresne on manipulation, David Dufresne is very much involved in tweeting and social networking. So that visibility from the producers and authors surely is requires expertise and fields of expertise that a producer must acquire. Comment, please, gentlemen. Rubbing on anymore.
The delay on the things. Buzz is word of mouth. So what you're looking to do is create content that generates word of mouth. And one of the blessings of the internet is it kills mediocrity. So if you're really, really bad, or if you're exceptional, then people will talk about you. And all that stuff in the middle is mediocrity. So that doesn't work anymore. And as program makers, as content creators, the one thing we have is content, and people should be talking about the content. And that's why I'm saying about telling stories on social media. Let your characters do the talking for you. Too often, particularly with like publishers, they're talking about their books. They should let the characters in the books be connecting to audiences. That's, you know, there's an author there with a vision and a character with all this rich detail, and they're not letting it speak. And so it just comes back to creating good stuff that generates word of mouth and allowing people to share that affection. So when you find advocates that really like it, you can enable them, empower them to advocate and share this content.
Sorry, just to add to that, I mean, I think the main question you have to ask yourself is, what is it in my story and what is it in my content that makes people talk about it, that makes people like it and share it? And you're absolutely right. It's not about mediocrity. It is about an exceptional story or something that, you know, that really touches an audience, that really, you know, that people really want to talk about. And, you know, I think this is next to defining your audience and understanding how your audience is built and how one leads to another one. I think this is another key question that you need to ask yourself straight in the beginning.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, totally. When talking, oh, sorry.
Go ahead. No.
When talking about buzz, since no one's raised the subject yet, I'll just speak briefly about crowdfunding, because that's one good way to get a buzz going. I think that's one of the major advantages of using Kickstarter or Indiegogo or Investin or whatever your preference is, or wherever you are based. Is, well, you can raise money, but that's not going to be revenue. That's going to be cash flow through your company that will enable you to create stuff that then might get you revenue in the end. But it'll also, as Kickstarter says, be a kickstart for whatever you are doing. And it gives you a reason to talk about what you are doing. It gives you a reason to spread the word. It gives you a reason to get your story and your characters and what you want to do out there, and in that way get a kickstart to whatever you are doing. Yeah.
And maybe after we'll ask for questions.
Yeah, I was also now just thinking, you know, another thing that I sometimes see happening is that, you know, like content creators or producers, they just hope that the buzz will happen, you know. They just like drop a project or drop a story, and I think one bigger mistake is that they immediately start sending out messages or press releases to bigger media. instead of understanding that this actually doesn't come by itself, you really need to have a strategy for this as well. And I've noticed that it works much better to, and I think this is also what you mentioned a little bit before, is to find first a smaller core audience and really think about, how do you create a dialogue, how do you create participation, and how will that lead to this bigger and bigger group. And only later on you'll notice that, bigger media will pick up, if everything works well, and then you hit more or less the sweet spot and you go into the big audience.
Just before we jump in. Very briefly, you talked about producers and authors. For all the films that I've produced, and it's not a big number, but we've always worked off book adaptations. And actually, I didn't know very much about the book publishing industry. And earlier this year, I spoke at the London Book Fair, which was interesting for me because within the Soligia world, the sci-fi world that we're working on, I wanted to publish books, and I really didn't. That's the one part of the media which I felt, out of all the different media, I'd not really touched before. So with a lot of curiosity, I went there to talk, and I was surprised that it was huge. I mean, it was the biggest intellectual property market I'd ever seen, like 1,160 deals going on every 15 minutes, that kind of scale. And there was about a third of the total area was digital, e-publishing and so forth. But what really struck me was the number of authors, book authors, that have now begun to engage in a digital book life, that they understand connection with their audiences and they actually value it, and they're dividing their time between authoring and that digital book life. And if there's a way that buzz is going to be useful in terms of story, because I mean nothing works if we don't have good story, it's that those authors that are very reclusive normally, in a way, can still be reclusive, but their own personal fourth wall is being broken down because they're so close to their readers. And that's a kind of an unusual development. And I think that there's going to be a generation of e-book publishers, e-authors that are going to develop some great 360 content. And I kind of think that some interesting stuff's going to come out of that.
On s'ouvre aux questions.
Questions from the audience. Julien, the hot consultant, Popus,
Very interesting statements. I'm interested in changes in cultural industries and where innovation comes to the market. I have two questions for the whole panel. The first one is, to what extent do you integrate, or do you think you will integrate accessibility in your storytelling, story writing? If I'm talking Chinese, I will explain a bit what it is about, let me know. And what I would be interested in, if you integrate accessibility in the storytelling, where is it interesting also for, not just for particular populations, but for the whole audiences? That is one point. The second point is about interactive advertising. Raymond, you mentioned that you are working with advertising people. And Simon, you said that the brands, when you're talking with them, they do not understand that you cannot foresee and control the customer reactions or viewer reactions.
Or they understand, but they don't like it.
Okay, so what is different, what is important here in interactive advertising compared to pictures or feature films or whatever within the storytelling? And can you give some examples, concrete examples, how you proceed?
What did you mean by accessibility?
Yeah.
Accessibility is today mainly subtitling, audio description for deaf people, for blind people. This is accessibility, I mean. But what I'm interested in is, if you consider specific populations, of course, producers are interested in selling to large audiences, brands as well, of course. One of the Paris museums, Quai Branly, just bought a multimedia application from a producer specializing for deaf people. But they did not buy it because it was for deaf people, but it's just because it's more pedagogical, more interesting, more intuitive for the whole audiences. And this is a bit the feedback I want to get from you, whether you integrate it directly in the content storytelling process.
Anyone I know that when I produced, I was asked this question about accessibility on Detective Avenue by one of the audience, and from my point of view as an independent producer, I unfortunately didn't have the means and the financial possibilities of subtitling or dubbing for international audiences. I didn't have the financial means. But maybe, I don't know.
I mean, one of the things with transmedia storytelling is that it should be a layered experience, because although you're talking about like let's say accessibility in terms of like impairments, you could also see like you've got people with the best smartphones, and then you've got like the general people with no phone, perhaps. And so you look to tell these stories so that they degrade gracefully. And it might be that you do have something that's audio only for people that are visually impaired. For example, and there is a particular game that comes to mind that was, they won't tell you that it's only for blind people because they want everybody to use it. But if you're blind, you're a wizard at this game because it has a 360 audio sort of surround thing, and you have to run away from invaders just using your thumb. So you're kind of cross-eyed listening only to your audio signals. And it's, if you're blind, then obviously you're used to recognising these sounds much better than if you're normally sighted. So I think we will find, you know, more examples of this type of thing written for people with specific skills.
I think there's kind of an interesting. First of all, transmedia can be anything, right? I mean, you can include anything in your world as part of your media storytelling, and I think radio anyway is a great medium. And of course, one of the first kind of points at which story broke out was when Orson Welles did his War of the World thing, and that might feel a little bit like a hoax in a way, but nevertheless, it shows radio is and always has been a really powerful medium. And I mean, so I think the idea of kind of including a kind of an audio only strand in something, or even getting everyone in a dark room so they have to be very tactile would be good. That's the other side of those saying you could create a transmedia project for deaf people or for blind people, and I think that's okay, but then you have to think, why would you do it? What's the point? And if you know what you're doing and what the story is and how you want to do it, the challenge then would be, how could you enhance the storytelling experience for a deaf or blind person by using different media, and in anything as a media? There was somebody showed me a project yesterday where artists had created a whole series of stories about objects which meant something to them, and those were linked via an app, so that if you took a picture of a barcode, it would trigger a story, so that the interaction between the barcode and the app became your interface with stories that you couldn't look at a list and know what they were, but it kind of it made the world come alive around you. And those kind of things also, for people that are visually impaired and so forth, become very interesting, because you could do stuff with RFID. You move through a space, and as you move through it, it triggers audio. So I mean, it's for why would, you know, what are you trying to do with an audience, and why? What are you trying to, and after that, it's structuring an interactive, non-linear, game-like, story-like experience, right?
Simon, you want to talk about the brands and advertising?
Yeah, I'll address the second question. We haven't actually produced interactive advertising, so I might be the wrong person to talk about this, but I'll give it a go anyway. First of all, I should say that I believe that brands absolutely need and should use transmedia storytelling methods to get, because what they want is for people to be more tightly connected to the brands, and transmedia can help you with that. An example is a small company called Black Milk Clothing. They do really cool clothing stuff, mostly for young women. But the one thing that struck me was that on their website, the founder tells the story from his childhood when he was sewing stuff, and what he builds is the story world of Black Milk Clothing, which makes the brand, to me, much more interesting. Another example is a Chinese site I read about that sells handicraft, and the items that feature videos where the makers actually describe what they are making, why they are making it, and how they are making it, sell more than double as the amount than the handicraft stuff that don't have any descriptions or any videos. And so yes, so there was some other point I had as well, but now I lost it. But yes, this was it. When you do interactive advertisement, you should plan for the long run as well. You need to plan what happens after the advertisement and how you harness that audience that you create, because that's one thing that transmedia projects are often not that good at. When you have amassed an audience, the project is over. And then you don't do anything with the audience, and you start rebuilding it again. So you have to have a long plan for how to harness that. One great example is from a Super Bowl ad from long time ago, Mitsubishi, I think it was, that showed a great advert where people were driving behind a lorry into Mitsubishis, and someone was throwing barrels of oil out of the truck. And it ended when one of the barrels was about to hit the car, and it pointed to the site, whathappenednext.com. So everyone went to whathappenednext.com, but Mitsubishi didn't plan ahead, so they let the URL go. So it's now up for grabs for like $2 million or something, which is silly.
Sorry, gentlemen. I think we have a lot of questions. If we can make short questions and simple questions and simple very answers. Good answers and short answers, I think everybody will be able to talk together. Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Wale. I'm from the Darwin agency. I just have a question. You're all great producers or great broadcasters with great transmedia projects, but since we all learn from our great mistakes, could you give us some details about some of your projects that actually failed and what you learned from them? Thank you.
Robert can start.
One project for each.
Yeah, so
short answers, no mistake.
Short answers. We had too much content delivered in too much time, in too little time rather. So this project Lowlifes that we'd spent a year kind of putting together, like in our spare time, because it was just a small project. We were moving town, and we go, oh bloody hell, we better get it out in the next 3 weeks. And we had far too much content, so we was asking the audience to go, to consume too much, and we could have spread that over twice as much, because we had webisodes, we had like epic chapters from this novel, and we had blog posts from the reader, and I think we could have dragged it out for 6 weeks or just cut half the content, I think.
Raymond?
Yeah. Yeah, actually, in our last project, which just in 1 or 2 lines was about a Dutch engineer that built himself wings so that he could fly like a bird, and we were following his whole building process and his whole fulfilling his dream for like 8 months. One thing that where we made a mistake in a way is that we sort of underestimated the audience, I would say. We thought we all figured it out quite well, but actually the audience managed to dig even deeper. So earlier than we expected, they sort of found out the truth behind our story, and we had to sort of improvise by sort of how do you say that to
hiding,
tell the truth basically behind our story.
It came out.
Yeah, it came out. So it came out earlier than we were hoping for basically. So that was a important learning point.
It's the drawback of having such a participative and interactive audience.
Exactly, because everybody was obviously involved in the story, and also in this case, because it was about flying, like a bird, and people. Something that we also, but has to do with this, something that we also didn't expect is that it really moved people. People were really involved. That was of course great, but people were also very sad when they found out that it was actually not true. People were also angry about it. Yeah, exactly. So in the end, I'm not saying that was negative, but we didn't expect that amount of involvement, and I mean it's great, but
it's. I would just to add something, because Raymond mentioned that unpredictability is, as far as the audience is concerned, is amazing on producing a transmedia project. Whether you have an audience that is looking for the truth and you hadn't predicted that, or whether it's an audience who's playing more than you had predicted, you're always learning new things. Always.
Yeah.
That's what I found out as well.
Actually, as a little anecdote, Yeah, I know, but I will keep this short. There was one guy that was going so far that he was really, you know, he really found out everything, and he was like really posting everywhere and started to mail broadcasters and everything. And I really had to call the guy and said, please shut up in a way. Don't do this. You're ruining our project. I'll make you part of the story. But then, you know, you're right, but wait for 2 or 3 weeks.
Okay, so to answer Wally, I'll give you 4 quick things. One is hoaxing. The first project I did was a hoax, and what you find out is if you hoax people at the end, they go, "Oh shit, you know, I was hoaxed." And what people want is to suspend disbelief and get into a rich story. So be upfront in a way which is in story that you're telling a story. 3 mistakes that we made. One is we used on live events, we used several cameras, up to 20 in one event, using a couple of broadcast cameras, but bloggers and smartphones. And what I didn't do, and I should have known it beforehand, was come up with a system where everything was whoever filmed it, where they would leave it, how they'd identify the scene and so forth. And we generated loads of content, and we had a real spaghetti of content to unravel to find out how to cut that together into short YouTube videos. In terms of production, we should still need, and we haven't yet designed it, release sheets per day, per video, per all the different media that will be released. So if you're doing like 5, 6, 7 media, at what time in a day is everything going to be released? It's in the script, but you need to break it out and make it explicit so that you know per day what you're going to release on what video and on what medium and who's doing it. And I think the last thing was we misunderstood. We thought we were telling pervasive game, and at a certain point we did something where our audience really wanted to go on a mission, and I realised that we'd stepped over, in their view, into a kind of an ARG that we didn't know, into an alternate reality game. And that kind of storytelling game thing is one which is kind of difficult to always get right. And so you have to be ready to spring in when they want to do something. That's a real tricky thing.
I think on these very early days of transmedia production, the subject, what can we learn from our mistakes and what the mistakes we did, can be a complete conference. That would be very interesting. Bruno, next year. Tu veux ajouter quelque chose?
Juste, effectivement, moi j'ai l'impression de faire que des erreurs tout le temps.
Indeed, I have the feeling that I keep making mistakes and I keep making failures, and this is part of my work. The last failure was in the manipulation project, and it was the following. We had this project and thought that we would try a form of gamification without coming up with a genuine game. And we had an amazing, tremendous history that appealed only to a small part of the audience. And for the other part of the audience that hasn't been pulled into this project, I think that we should have gone further into this game project and really come up with a genuine game as part of this project. But we are trying and testing all the time. As I told you, this is the way we work.
Dialogue Netcast production, French producer, bilingual, as you can see. I have a question for lifespan of Transmedia. I mean, we start projects. I'm into one of them. Where do the contracts go? The new fade in Paris are 7-year contracts. What are your contracts? What's the length of time? Intellectual property? How do you deal with all that? I mean, here we're constructing contracts. We're making new contracts every week. So I'd like to know your experience with that. And the lifespan, do you anticipate how long your Transmedia is going to be? Vous le bouclez? Do you finish it before you start it? Or do you have an idea of a lifespan and an internal life, a continuous lifespan on your
So
project?
legal aspects and lifespan of a project.
I think one of the biggest mistakes that people can make when they start to work in Transmedia is come up with a huge project which seems like a castle in the air and you have to do everything. I think you have to be really pragmatic and say, I've got a story world which is described but doesn't have any specific stories in it. Then pick stories out, just like if you're going to write a novel, you pick a story out and you write it and you know what the backstory is, and you pick a story out that you're going to tell, or a set of stories which are transmedially architected as an installment. This is my approach. I'm not saying it's not a rule, this is the way I do it. And so what I did in Amsterdam was the installment within this sci-fi world. The next installment I'm working on in North America moves the story forward, and it's an installment, and it uses lots of different media. It's got its own start and finish. It's got its own, and if you can make those things happen in 6 months, you've got a very focused team, you won't get it perfect, you'll fail quickly at the things that go wrong, you'll move on, you'll get it done, and then you can move on to the next thing, and you're not spending half your life thinking, I want to make this project, because it's just not the way to learn.
Sur les contrats, Boris, comment vous travaillez vous
As regards the contracts, how do you work? Do you use IPs for the contracts? How do you work?
Évidemment assez compliqué parce qu'on est dans des...
Contracts are a rather complicated issue because we have no clear set rules in terms of uses and practices. Of course, we use this 7 years span for our digital media, but this is only due to the fact that we only see ourselves as content editors and not broadcasters. So the AV typical form of a contract is not working well when it's applied to this kind of project. So how can we work together, develop a meaningful working method, bearing in mind the fact that the projects develop much quicker than the contract do. So this is a constant changing topic. Another aspect that relates to your question on the lifespan is the following. Working for TV, you use a hard drive, beta versions, and you have some content that really remain stored somewhere. But if you work online, you've got your content that is online and then right after goes offline. So we might imagine a symmetry of started cross-media projects, and I don't think that we have any kind of solution today for this lifespan issue. Shall we move to another question? We still have 10 minutes for this debate because it is such a fascinating debate that we would like to further discuss this topic for the whole day. Pascal Sunicourt, I'm currently writing a cross-media project, and I was asking myself whether or not monetizing the project, the monetization should already be forecast when writing the project, when drafting it, or who is in charge of this project monetization aspect? This is a very relevant question because we wanted to discuss those financial aspects while talking about the buzz. Robert?
I think you should think about where the revenue is going to come from while you're writing it, yes. And I think what you'll find is you've got some platforms that are very good at spreading the word, that generate in this engagement and so on, but maybe you don't charge for that. And you've got other platforms which are very difficult to get people into because they're actually going to pay for it. And I think you need to think about that right from the beginning, what the business model is, because the revenue thing is potentially the goal for you, and so then you're going to create other platforms around it. You do, yeah. Why you're not worried about who pays for it?
Yeah, of course, but I don't think that while you're writing, you should be thinking about where the revenues are coming from.
See, I think you should, because I feel like the audience participation, the goal is going to determine how you ask the audience to participate.
I guess
so
it depends what. If you think about writing's kind of phased as well, right? But while you're trying to coming up with a story that works. I mean, I guess you're a writer, not a producer, right? Is that correct? Right? So are you telling me that you think that writers, I mean, even like somebody like Dan Brown that comes up with the Da Vinci Code, he knows he's writing a genre piece, and he knows that he's trying to write what's called trade literature, right? So he's trying to write something which isn't literature, but it's storytelling. So he knows he's trying to write a commercial piece, but at which point, you know, the core is write the story, write the story, write the story, get that done. Then when you put around it, then you start to say, okay, how do I want my audience to engage with me? Do I want them to play with it, share it, co-create, extend it? From there, you start to think, what kind of business agreements can I have if I'm going to work with mobile or with a broadcaster or whatever? And then you start to get to the media and the tech layer, which your audience is actually going to experience. But you're starting from the middle, you're working outwards, right? And at that point, when you get out there, you can start to say, you know, at the point you're writing, I don't know, maybe you don't know if you're writing a book or if you're writing a TV series, or if you're writing a film, but at the core is you're writing a story. And if that doesn't work, then we can all go home. Because if you don't have a good story, then you don't have anything.
So would you advise our friend to focusing and write his story and then go and see a producer who will figure out and find ways to finance it?
No, I think it's kind of a massaging. I think it's a kind of a phased thing. You need to get that story work right, and whether you write on your own or if you write in a group or if you write with a story editor, but you need to get the reason that your world exists. If you were writing a novel, you would be saying, I want to come into this scene as late as I can. If it's a thriller, you're coming in at the point of urgency and you're telling your story, right? But you know what that guy's done beforehand, and you know the world in which he exists and so forth. So you have to do that work anyway, but if you're writing a book, you normally wouldn't see it. And here you're writing something that you know you want to have 360, so you're doing research in a different kind of way so that you're getting all of that kind of solid as your story world. And from there you're beginning to say, which narratives in this story world am I going to tell? And then you can start. Once you've got that right, then you could start to look at what media.
So you're talking about a story world, but I'm going to go back to Simon when they conceive, because maybe I'm sorry I forgot your name, but when he's writing a story world, this is a big universe, and if we talk about huge and great story world, such as Harry Potter, or you will always find people who will find that attractive and who will sell that. However, if we write shows, concepts and programs, we can ask the questions of financing. And I'm going to go back to the Meal Sessions, which is a music program written and developed by Simon and his team. And when you wrote the Meal Session and this story about the meal and the musicians, did you know that you were going to go and see the cable operators, the stream video companies, or did it come after?
Yeah, we knew that it was going to be a hell of a expensive production. So we knew that we needed a lot of money in, and basically what we did was we developed it all up to a certain point, and I started looking at what made sense, what made sense to who should we approach and what should we approach them with, and basically that's how we did it. Yeah, but I will say I agree with both of you. Yes, it is. I'm the diplomat, because I think that it all depends on the context. You can start, if you're Dan Brown, you obviously start out with the novel. But if you're doing a web series with a game attached, then you write the web series and the game is you pay and you plan for the game people to pay for the game, or for extra content on the web behind a paywall or whatever. I will add that I don't like the idea of paywalls because it disrupts the narrative.
Gentlemen, we have a lot of questions and we say we make short.
Okay.
Just to remember you, just for me a question with yes and no. It's very easy to answer. There is a market next door. Are you looking for project for co-producing? Yes or not? Yes? Simon? Ian? Sorry? Can you use your microphone because they not translate? Can you use your microphone, please?
Edward de Bono invented a word between yes and no, lateral thinking, right? It's called PO, possible other.
Okay.
It sits between the two, right?
Robert?
I'm not looking to co-produce, but we are looking for new clients that want to use our platform, yeah. Okay. I'm looking for customers.
That's great. Simon?
Yeah. No, but ask again in 6 months' time when I've got the 26 projects I have up and running now off my back.
Okay. And Boris, you have a lot of meetings all day.
Bonjour, je m'appelle Denis, je suis blogueur.
Good morning, my name is Denis, I'm a blogger and I work also for TV. A very simple question. When we have a cross-media project, we want to broadcast it. We have a TV broadcaster who have mobile, digital and other units within their company. This is a very linear and vertical structure. According to your experience, which person should we first approach in order to discuss our project and then add to this a little bit of mobile, web and so on to reach a good financial structure?
Puisque tu es
Boris, you are the right person to answer this question as the head of the Cultural and Transmedia unit. Of course, its project is specific, but at the FTV, we tried to work in a different way and to work in a horizontal way. So whether the project comes via our unit or via the TV AV unit, it doesn't make a difference. I set up cross-media committees within FTV, and the project is going to be discussed within those cross-committees, gathering people from broadcast, TV, content, and media. All those players who can consider the future of the project in terms of a media box or different supports. I think that this is the way we make decisions and we decide whether or not the project is viable and whether or not we want to go for it. Of course, TV live implies higher budget lines, and so this needs to be taken into account. We have 2 more questions and then we'll have to move on to another topic, unfortunately.
Frankfurt, I've worked in between cultures, between English and German, and I'm involved in localization. At what point in any of your story making and storytelling do you consider whether your story can be localized to completely different cultures?
Since I work with formats, then I think about it all the time, because, you know, to sell a format is to localize it somewhere else. So yes, obviously for me, the answer would be for each and every project I work on, yes.
And I agree with that completely. I mean, I think that if you're going to start projects as well, which are in some way experimentally funded, then it's useful. And if you've got themes which are universal, and the kind of things that interest me are those kind of things, then you can structure things in such a way that whether it's from Dusseldorf or Toronto or wherever the money's going to come, that's where the next installment of the research phase of what I'm doing is going to happen. And yeah.
Well, actually, I agree with both.
Okay.
But you know, it really depends on the project, obviously, and yeah, nothing more to add.
Last question, maybe.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Cedric. I'm working for a technology provider in Multiscreen. Boris, you talked briefly about gamification. It was more in your failure list. So I just wanted to know, all of you, how do you envision such kind of technique in your next productions?
You need to come back to this afternoon.
Yeah, and then Laurent will be the moderator again, where there is a panel about video game and transmedia. What's the game of influence?
I'm just saying that it's I don't think there's a short answer to gamification.
We do it all the time, but we don't use that word gamification because it implies some like crass awarding of just badges and, you know, pats on the back. But we look at audience engagement through the lens of gaming. So we look at, we call it narrative design, so it's storytelling plus gaming. Because if you want to look at people that sit for 40 hours playing a game, that's engagement. And there's clues there for how to reward people and motivate them going forward all the time.
In terms of storytelling, I think that story and game are they're like the flip side of the same coin. And I think that if somewhere way back, when cultures were very simple and it was like fireside stuff, that there were a lot of advantages to tell stories, to transfer knowledge, and to play games to simulate skills. And I think that somewhere in there, game and story is very, very closely linked, and that's where we're getting to as well with these kind of 360 immersive environments.
Okay, so gentlemen, it was absolutely passionating. You say that in English? Not sure. Passionate. Thank you very much. You can all meet each other at the coffee, and in half an hour here, we sing each other for pitches. Thank you.